It's time for Windows Weekly. We've got Mary Jo's big scoop. She wouldn't tell us last week, but now she admits she's known all along why Microsoft's already testing a version of Windows for 2020. Also, screenshots of Microsoft's Edgium browser, our first look, and you won't believe which Microsoft app is going open source. It's all coming up next on Windows Weekly.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Windows Weekly with Paul Thurrott and Mary Jo Foley. Episode 611, recorded Wednesday, March 6th, 2019. Band on the run. Windows Weekly is brought to you by WordPress. Turn your dreams into reality and launch your website at WordPress.com. Get 15% off any new plan at WordPress.com/Windows. And by LastPass. Ensure safer workplace password sharing with LastPass, the #1 most preferred password manager. Visit LastPass.com/Twit to learn more. It's time for Windows Weekly. Sorry, I had a little swerve on the road there. Windows Weekly. Paul Thurrott is here. Whoa, from Thurrott.com. And Mary Jo Foley's also here from ZDNet, all about Microsoft.com. The Battle of the Brains. I think we should measure.
Yeah.
Paul Thurrott, what is your hat size?
It's pretty big.
I don't know if that's,
Yeah, I'm not a big hat guy.
Precise enough. Mary Jo, what's your hat size?
I don't know. I wear a large hat though. Like I can wear men's hats easily.
Okay. I guess we'll put this on hold
now
until you guys get a tape measure.
Is the harder thing head circumference is one thing.
Right.
But hard-headedness is going to be.
Is that what you're debating? Who has the harder head?
Both things.
This comes back to something we'll talk about a little later. Mary Jo Foley had a chance to put on the HoloLens, and it was adjusted for somebody, like Andre the Giant, and it still fit.
It fit fine. Yeah.
It fit fine. So, why doesn't Microsoft have a little slider that says your hat size on there? That would make it easy. Because no one knows their hat size, apparently.
Yeah. Plus, you have to kind of accommodate for, do you wear it a little more forward or back?
And people's heads aren't round, in case you didn't notice.
Sure.
They could be ovoid.
Yeah. Mine looks like a Minecraft block. Kind of a Frankenstein thing.
Blockhead. Yeah.
Let's start things off with 20H1, which was the strangest thing last week. But now we know.
Last week I promised that Mary Jo was going to break the news.
She did.
And then she said, no, I'm not.
Oh,
I just waited a day.
This is the thing you were holding.
Yeah.
Okay. What was it?
Okay. And so the reason I waited a day was this is super complicated. Talking about having big heads, you need a big brain to try to even understand this, right? Yeah, right. So when Microsoft did the skip ahead recently to 20H1, we were all thinking the reason they were doing it was they were trying to hide something, right? Like maybe there's a big new feature coming that they don't want us to see in the 19H2 build or in the 20H1 build. Or maybe they're, kind of messing around with the cadence of the builds. We had all these theories and we were throwing them out there. And then one of my contacts said to me, wow, you guys are making up some elaborate theories.
That's always my greatest fear is that they're laughing at us in Redmond going, oh, that's pretty funny.
We attribute intelligence where there often is none.
Right. And cause, right? And effect. And we think we figured it out.
It's a lesson for all of us, though, that, Kremlinology sometimes can overcomplicate things.
Totally.
Conspiracy theories are usually completely wrong.
Yeah.
They are. They're fun, but they're usually way too complicated to pull off.
There had to have been 3 shooters, Mary Jo. One shooter? That's impossible.
So
here's the real reason.
Is it kind of boring, really, the real...
It's boring, but it's also, if you're into code names, it's intriguing.
Obviously, that's why we're starting the show with that.
Let's lead with the dullest story possible.
No. So the real reason this is happening, I'm hearing from multiple contacts now, is Microsoft is trying to align the schedules of the Azure team and the Windows team. So if you remember last March when Terry Myerson was helped out of Microsoft, like issued the door. They took the Windows engineering team and they put them in with the Azure engineering team. And so we've been thinking, oh, that must have already been affecting the code and the way they're developing the code. But I'm hearing it has not been really. And it's just about to start happening now. And the way they build things in Azure is they have this core platform release that comes out in June and December, right? So they're on a June-December thing. The Windows team is on a March-September thing. So they're trying to make it so that these schedules align and that the code, when it gets dropped to the Windows client team, will be able to be used for the next feature release. So right this year, that can't happen because of where they're both at in their respective schedules. And so what's going to happen with 19H2 is they're going to take the code that's in 20H1 and backport it to 19H2. So there will be a 19H2 build, but it will actually be more like a cumulative update based on 19H1 with some features from 20H1 backported. I know. See, this is when you need the big head.
What do you think it was like in the Azure engineering room when the Windows engineer guy showed up? It was like a high school where there's like an honors class and they had to cut the level 1 class because there weren't enough students, and they're like, "You'll just go into the same class." And the honors guys are all like, "Ah."
No,
here come,
no, no, because
okay.
I mean, that would be funny. It would be like a movie, a musical maybe. But
musical, yes.
But really what's been happening is so Azure actually is built on top of the Windows Server core, right? And Windows Server and Windows Client have been working together for a few past years on developing their releases in tandem. But if you actually could open up Azure and look at the core that's in there now, it's not built on the most current Windows 10 build. It's built on one from like Redstone 1. Like that's how old that code is. And so the Azure team is like, guys, we want to be on a more recent release.
Can we pause for a moment to understand the irony of a Microsoft product not moving to the latest version of Windows because it's a stable code base and they don't want anything to go wrong? Like, seriously? I mean, does that not seem right?
Ironic?
Yeah. Hypocritical.
Although, but in theory, there are features, especially around security, that have come to the Windows 10 feature releases that you would think the Azure team would want to incorporate into the core of Azure.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some real features. I'm not talking about emoji, right? I'm talking about like stuff they've done with Defender ATP and things like that. The sandbox that's coming, these are all things you want to have in the code. So what they're trying to do basically is align all of these things together and make it so that when the core OS team in this combined engineering organization drops the core and they say, here it is, take it, Windows client, take it, all these other teams and do what you want with it, that everybody will be on the same page. Does any of this make sense? It's super hard to explain this.
No, they just want to be. They want to be in sync with each other. That's fine.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah,
they do. And
it's
so
like
remember
why
when
they
I
skipped
heard those?
Windows 9.
Yeah.
No, it's literally nothing like that.
Oh.
No, remember when I was hearing these crazy code names and I was saying there's this thing called Vibranium and there's this thing called Vanadium, and I was like, I don't know what these are, but I think they're Windows, right? So what those are the core OS platform.
Yeah,
that's what that is, right? So Vanadium is the next release after 19H1. Like that's going to be the core that they build the next release on top of. And then after
that's
Vanadium,
released in June. Am I getting that right?
Right. That's going to come out in June, but the team isn't going this time. The Windows team isn't going to be able to use that because the schedules don't align.
Okay,
after that,
it makes sense.
Vibranium.
It will make sense in the future. Yeah,
it will. Going forward, it should make way more sense
because the core part of the OS is finalized 3 months ish before the feature update part of it goes out to users. So it's enough time between the two.
That's enough time, right? In theory. I mean, for what I know, but then there's this whole other idea that, and this gets even more complicated, but you know how right now, the spring releases of Windows 10 feature updates, they're supported for 18 months, right? And the fall releases are supported for 30. So another idea is if you were just basically making the fall updates kind of like a service pack, although, you will never hear Microsoft use those words. It'll be more resilient and hardened because they're going to be taking stuff 19H from the release that's ahead of it, backporting it, maybe even making those features optional, like turn off. You can turn them off and turn them on through group policies or something. Okay. So yeah, they're looking at ways to align the schedules and possibly also to make Windows more resilient and more stable with that. And will they ever acknowledge this publicly? I don't know. It might be something they just say, what, users don't need to know how we're making the sausage. They just need to eat the sausage. So yeah,
I don't think that we ever really had an understanding of how the core kernel part of Windows was being developed anyway, right? I mean, they never really discussed that almost at any point in time, with a few rare exceptions.
No, they never have talked about that publicly. And, even things, I wonder if they'll talk about it going forward, because we keep hearing about Windows Core OS with a capital C that's different from Windows Core, small c, right? And will they ever talk about how those two things relate and what Windows Core OS is and what all these shells are? I mean, these are all interesting to us because we care a lot about Windows, but does the average user want or need to know? I don't know.
I mean, in the sense that Azure and Server and Windows Client all need or may have a core central part that is common to all of them. Yeah, I guess that would be the core with a small c. The way I see Windows Core is just an evolution of the componentization work that Microsoft's been doing since Longhorn, and it relates to the client. And the client kind of splits out into different paths that used to, but no longer includes phone. But there are things like HoloLens and Surface Hub in addition to the Windows for PCs and IoT and so forth. And then the different shells are the things that run on top of those. They're essentially the user experience that may differ between the different clients. We'll see a different user experience in Windows Lite or whatever they call that, which would be based on Windows Core with a capital C, because it's a client that end users use. Yep. I guess that's how I see it. I'm not. Yeah, I think
you are right.
But I think that makes sense. Yeah.
I know. Yeah. The hard part of all this is I feel like, especially IT users, they need some guarantees right now about Microsoft doing something to make Windows 10 feature updates better. And we've been getting this blog series on the Windows blog about all the ways that they do all kinds of internal telemetry about how do we determine when things are ready. And here's the millions of machines that we're taking signals from. But I think what IT pros want to hear is, but what are you going to do to make this better and more stable for the period that I'm supporting this particular version of a feature update?
Unfortunately for Microsoft, I think the promise has always been better than the explanation in some ways has been better than the reality, right? There's always a lot of words, about how we're never going to let that last problem happen in the next version, et cetera, et cetera. But, we're coming off a particularly bad year here, I would say, for Windows updates. So some clarity there would be nice for sure.
It would be. So that's what I hear is happening. And I haven't had anybody come out and say to me, wow, you're so wrong. That's so wrong. You're not right at all. And this is way off base. So I'm thinking it's right.
There are two shooters, Mary Jo. That's why it's impossible.
No, you know how Microsoft is. If you do a story, a sources said story, and you have like one comma misplaced, they will come out and tell you your entire story is wrong, right? Like they love to do that. Yep. So far, I haven't had anybody come back and say, yeah, that's really not what's happening. I mean, maybe it isn't what is happening. And if you're listening to Windows Weekly and you think this is incorrect and you want to help, you can send us some tips.
I think it makes perfect sense.
I do too.
I think it makes a lot of sense too. Yeah.
I don't think we need to go any farther than just, the obvious.
What is it?
We just were looking for something like there's a secret feature, right? Something huge.
Well, we unfortunately, because there's so little information, we often have to speculate about the rationale behind things. It was very unusual. It still is a unique occurrence for them to be developing a version of Windows that's due a year from now. They've never done that before, and they did it without explanation.
I know.
And so, yes, I mean, naturally, you kind of look at that and you think about all in the context of everything we've ever talked about. You had offered up the notion of an R2 type schedule. I would prefer to see a single release every year.
Yeah.
This suggested that this would be a major release. There's something in there that they need to test. And by the way, there is something major in there they need to test. It's the next, Windows Core is really,
right.
that's the thing.
That's true. Yep.
So, I mean, maybe this is the new normal going forward because
I think
they're
it might be.
synchronizing. Yeah, the two releases.
That's my guess. Is this maybe this is the way Skip Ahead goes forward now? Like, we'll always be like a whole year ahead with Skip Ahead.
Jeez.
I know. And so this brings into question what does the Insiders program do now, right? Because now they've got people on Skip Ahead who can't go back, and you're going to need to have people test 19H2 and the Skip Ahead release and then the next release. So how they manage the Insider program is going to get a little more complicated, I would assume.
Yeah. Maybe the slow ring becomes more of a formal thing they actually use instead of something they ignore. But my guess is, especially if it's the plumbing type stuff, the need for actual human beings outside of Microsoft to test a release that's coming a year from now is not necessarily that great. So I suspect that there would be relatively few people on that channel or whatever, or that ring going forward, because it's just not that interesting, right? We're not going to see end user features today that are not going to appear until a year now. I mean, those things will come later, and probably will be added after we see them in 19H whatever, in many cases, right, or later in the schedule. So,
right,
that's probably fine. I think for that kind of low level stuff, the automated testing that Microsoft has probably is mostly enough.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, how weird would it be to always be in the two versions ahead? You're essentially never ever testing anything new, because of the weird nature of it, right? I mean, features will be added to that thing after they're added elsewhere, and then once we get to the exciting part of development where end user features are being added, you've moved on to the next one already. So it's just, you're always kind of ahead. And so in that sense, from a user experience standpoint, in some ways, you're always behind. If that makes sense.
Mind blown.
Yep.
Yeah. All I can say is if all this ends up making the feature updates more stable and gives people who want to test them a longer test runway, I think it's all goodness.
Yeah.
Because I feel like things are just happening too fast, right? It's like, here's another release, and you haven't even deployed this yet, but here's another release. Like that's gonna happen with 1809. Like most people don't even have that, and we're almost ready to roll out 1903.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see what happens once 1903 is finalized.
I know.
And whether or not the 1809 deployments keep happening.
Or do you just skip ahead to 1903?
Right. I mean, at some point, I think they're going to want to cut it off, but I bet they don't, I bet they're going to have this weird overlap now.
Yeah. It's a dilemma.
It's an enigma and a riddle.
It is. It's all of those things. But yeah, anyway, I don't think it's anything crazy or I think we were just kind of hoping like there was going to be a big surprise. Right.
I didn't. Okay. I guess I didn't think of it as being hopeful. I just thought of it as logically, like, why would they do this? It was so unique, and so unexpected. There had to be something going on, and we did, to be fair, I mean, the past 2 or 3 Windows feature updates have been on the light side, which honestly is great. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. But I know there's a big impetus over there in certain circles still to do something exciting. And, you have to kind of wonder, because there certainly are things coming that are kind of interesting, the xCloud stuff and the combination of Xbox and Windows gaming and, could there, it's hard not to think that something, and the Windows Light stuff, of course, dual screen devices, blah, blah, blah. Like your mind naturally gravitates toward, there's a reason for this, and there is, it's just not what we thought it was.
Yeah. I mean, another thought and suggestion we had was when we were guessing reasons, maybe this is when Windows Light comes into play, and then some people were saying, what if that is when they decouple the browser from Windows 10?
Sure.
So there were like a lot of possible things on the timeline where you could have said, okay, that's why they're doing that this time. But if it is the new normal, then it's not because of that, right?
No, not necessarily. But I mean, those are all, again, I don't want to feel bad that we guessed along those lines or that other people did. I mean, it's a natural reaction to this because, again, it was unprecedented. We had never experienced that before.
Agree.
And by the way, they're still completely silent on this topic.
They are. Yeah. Yeah.
Speaking of
that's all I have to
completely
say.
silent, I'm sorry I drifted off during that, but I'm sure.
You know what? I needed a whiteboard.
I'm busy with something else. I don't know what this is, but it's magical.
It's a phone with a hole in it.
It's a phone with a hole in it. Oh, you spoiled it for me. Dang it. Okay. I didn't expect my S10 to come today, so
when was it supposed to come?
I thought Friday, but I'll be March 8th. But I'll be drifting off during your conversation from now on. So
we'll just keep.
Please,
we'll plow ahead.
Do you want to talk about calculator now? Because I'm excited about that.
Only a very little bit.
Are we at that point? Or should we want to talk about 18?
I guess we could just say what happened with 19H1, blah blah blah. We could just
48.
Well, I mean, that stuff's quick. I mean, in the week that has passed since we last saw you, Leo.
What happened since we saw each other last?
There have been, I want to say, 3 build releases, 2 19H1 and 1 20H1 that happened just today. None of them are particularly notable. I think the thing on the 19H1 end is that it's pretty clear that development of that is winding down, right? And so 2 builds ago, we got the Emoji 12 that I barely pay attention to. And then the most recent release, which might have been, was it last night? It might have been last night.
Yesterday, right? Yeah.
Yeah. No new features at all, right? And so this is how these things tend to wind down. So based on previous experience, 7, 8, 10, 21 more weeks, whatever it is until they finish this thing. But I don't expect to see any more new features. So this is probably the beginning of the end, if not the end of the beginning.
So, just curious, can you tell the difference?
Yeah, one of them's taller.
That's the Note 9.
Does one have a hole in it?
That's the S10.
One doesn't?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like the one on the right has sensors at the top of the screen. So are there sensors at the top of the S10? Are they just not visible? Maybe I'm just not seeing them. Yeah, it looks really clean up there.
There's the hole punch.
I mean, obviously you have you have the hole, but aside from that, like that's the whole.
Yeah, it goes all the way. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is the ceramic back because, hey, I'm worth it.
What's the hole for? I've missed this whole part.
Oh, this is the new thing. So many phones, as you're probably aware, have opted for a notch.
Yes, I have one with a huge notch.
I was going to say, yeah, she's all too well aware, Leo.
So Samsung is blazing a new path with a hole punch for the 2 cameras.
Yeah, I think it looks great. I think this is much better than a notch.
Well, I'm going to turn it on. And, of course, all the wallpaper carefully make it dark over in this corner. So
it isn't an actual hole all the way through, or is it?
It is.
It is.
Yeah, it's a hole in the glass.
And then there's also...
what can you put in there? Anything?
No. Oh, you mean like, is it a hole? Like, is it dug in? No. It's not.
Oh, it's a camera.
I was thinking, keychain. Nice.
No, it's right.
It's not that kind of hole.
It's not for earrings. It's for...
It's a hole in the screen. Here, you can see it now. This is a good way to see it. See that?
Oh,
they can't display anything in that area because the screen is cut out.
Just like the notch thing, except more tasteful.
Yeah. Well, maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
That's a good idea, though. If we could put a hole in there, I could put this on my keychain. So the funny thing about this is this has a terabyte of storage. 12 gigs of RAM. I mean, it's basically a little, pocket computer.
Yeah.
Sure.
I don't know if this is a screen protector or
but I'm peeling it off.
Protective plastic. I don't like it.
Whatever it is, it's coming off.
I don't like it. All right, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to derail the conversation.
It's okay.
Ooh, buds from AKG. And I got, a free earbud for ordering it before anybody had a chance to review it. That's your reward. These are good headphones, though. They pack pretty good headphones in there. All right, well, anyway. Let's actually, you know what I want to do?
Talk about calculator.
Let's talk about that's what I really want to do, because aside from Notepad, the most valuable tool on Windows is the calculator.
I
Are they going to add paper tape? Are they? I mean, what's new?
I'm really weirded out by this, even though I knew it was coming.
What?
Yeah, I thought you were the one who said. Aren't you the person who said this? Okay, I thought I wasn't mentioning. You said all the inbox apps.
Yeah, someone said we were talking about Notepad, and someone said, why don't they just make a UWP version of Notepad? And I said, actually, I heard they were open sourcing Notepad as well as other inbox apps, and Calculator and a few others. Now, Calculator is a UWP app actually, right. So it's been redone, but I am completely unclear as to the benefit or purpose of open sourcing a calculator app. Just as a background, I will say that when you learn to program in any language, Calculator is chapter 1. It is the simplest app to make. You can make a beautiful calculator in JavaScript. It's very simple. And, there was a guy on Twitter. I didn't want to make fun of him. I'll do it now, I guess. But, he's like, as a programmer, I just want to let you know that it's really valuable to be. No, it isn't.
No, it's not.
This is a calculator app.
Unless they're doing something magical.
No,
well,
and
I don't know if this is true, but another person said, you know what? There's so few well-written Windows UWP apps.
Oh, it's a UWP example. I can understand.
Yeah.
Okay, I see the value of that.
That's okay, but
it's.
I understand your point, and I understand his point too. That every little bit helps at this point. If you still think there's value in it.
Here's the
big UWP.
I don't know that there's any less UWP lessons to be learned from this. Because I have not looked at the source code. I mean, it's probably structured in a very logical way. Whatever. That's not really the point. This is another example of kind of a one-off thing that I dislike that they've been doing lately in Windows 10. So, for example, you'll remember they added a little feedback thing in the menu in Notepad. It was like, ooh, look, we have a play. It goes right to the feedback hub. That's fascinating. Is that menu item in every other app that's built into Windows 10, or is it just in Notepad? And by the way, it's just in Notepad. So, what was the point of that? And so, you're just open sourcing Calculator. I mean, it's like what? It doesn't.
Well, everybody else in my feed is like Notepad's next, right? Like that's like everybody in my feed right now.
I did hear it was coming. And by the way, for whatever it's worth, I mean, honestly, it is kind of goofy that they never made a UWP version of Notepad. It's kind of goofy, I think, but.
I wonder if part of it isn't because a lot of people use Notepad for programming, right? And that I use it in a very unusual way. I actually use it as a note-taking app. Most people don't use it like that.
Yep.
So maybe that's why. Like maybe if they made it into a UWP app, it would make it less useful to programmers. I don't know. But there are UWP Notepad apps in the store that aren't
for sure.
from Microsoft.
And they're yes, and they're often terrible. It's kind of hard. I think what happens is if you think you're like, I want to put a UWP app in the store. I want it to be something simple. Calculator's already taken. With this 3 million RSS apps. RSS, by the way, is chapter 2 in the programming book. You make a text editor, right? And so I think for a lot of people, they want to go beyond text, right? They'll add some features for either support rich text or markdown or line numbers or programming features or, whatever it is, right? So I think the beauty of Notepad is its simplicity. But there is nothing special about Notepad that couldn't be reproduced identically for all intent and purposes in a UWP app. in some ways, it says a lot about that platform that Microsoft hasn't done this. If there's something about UWP that would make this app untenable for programmers or power users, whoever else uses this thing, then something's wrong with UWP. It's a Notepad app. It's just a text app. I mean,
I know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but here we are. Open source.
Here we are. Yep, I know.
Calculator. You calculate in the open.
It's, if you go to the Google UWP page, of course they have a sample app with sample code. And people, it's pretty common when you are writing code that you copy other people's code from sources. Sure. So I think it's nice. It does beg the larger question of how come Office isn't written in UWP? If it's such a great technology, why doesn't Microsoft use it everywhere?
Okay. That I could defend because Office is a decades-old legacy suite of applications, right? And
very complex.
Rewriting that thing in UWP would be a non-starter, I think. But when you look at the inbox apps, they did rewrite Calculator. That made sense. It's a simple app. Yeah. Notepad is a similarly simple app. Something like WordPad, then they're never going to update it. There's no point in doing a sort of word processor in Windows, so I could see leaving that one behind. But there are complex apps in Windows that I don't understand why they're still the desktop Win32 app of old, like File Explorer. How the heck has that never been updated into a modern app? That's crazy. Maybe there's something wrong with UWP.
Yeah, there is.
Now that's a conspiracy theory.
No, I think more and more.
Follow the money, Leo.
Yeah. There are developers who are just like, I'm not rewriting my legacy app as UWP. There's no upside to me doing this at all.
Yeah, right. Yep. And then, of course, with the whole, who knows what they were planning, but the way the store has kind of topsy-turved its way to the future, we can put desktop applications in the store now, and they can be, made to be safer and more reliable and easy to uninstall and all that good stuff. And there are certainly benefits to that.
Right.
So I think that's a good solution for the makers of complex desktop apps. They don't have to start over from scratch. Plus, they still maintain a single code base essentially, and it works in other versions of Windows.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? Open source has a nice ring to it. Are they going to put it on GitHub?
You're killing me, Leo. Killing me.
It's on GitHub under an MIT license. Yeah.
The source code, the Windows calculator is the crown jewels. I don't understand why you give that away.
You're giving away the one warning. And Bill Gates spent a lot of time writing that,
Where does it stop?
It never stops.
Reason you don't open source bigger programs is because you don't want anybody to see the comments.
Yeah.
There's a lot of profanity in there. There's a lot of, I don't know why this works, but I'm going to leave it here stuff. And there's also, more importantly, there's proprietary code that's licensed from other places that you can't give away. So,
the one thing I'm semi-privy to, because I talked to these guys, and this was, I guess it was the Windows Vista. Yeah, I think it was Windows Vista timeframe. Microsoft took the time, and it was a small team of people that did this, to modernize the inbox apps at the time, right? Now, some of them have literally moved forward since then without being changed at all, but Calculator, which back then was a Win32 app, obviously. Notepad was one of those apps. What else was in there? I think Paint and possibly even something like Minesweeper, maybe, or some of those type of games. The simple, remember we used to have those kind of simple games in Windows. I think it was Windows. Pretty sure it was Windows Vista timeframe. The code was modernized, and so when you think about moving forward to a store platform, whether it was Windows 8, Windows 10, whatever, for a simple app, it seems like that should have been a pretty straightforward process, right? Mm-hmm. And that this Calculator app, no doubt, benefited from earlier efforts to modernize the code base. That had happened, previously. I should try to go back and find that. I interviewed those guys.
Mm-hmm.
I think they also, this is kind of goofy, but I think they were responsible for bringing Sidebar to Windows XP, which ultimately never happened.
I'm looking up this thing because somebody just reminded me of this. I'm laughing. Remember What year was this? 2015. Mark Russinovich was quoted saying an open source Windows is definitely possible. Do you remember that?
Oh.
And there was this huge uproar, and everyone's like, what?
What? No, you're crazy, man.
Right. How could that even happen? And that was, 2015. And now, could that happen?
In the year 2525, if woman can survive.
Listen, they can pry my cold, dead fingers from proprietary source Windows, but I suppose that could happen, yeah.
No,
I know.
No, it's too big a code base. You don't open source 10 million.
There'd have to be something they kept back, you would think.
Yeah. No, and they've
just
licensed
because,
stuff, and there's you can't. No.
I mean, that is still there. It's not
Besides,
Microsoft's
there's
crown jewel.
There's all that Linux code in there. They don't want anybody to see that.
Yeah.
Oh, Leo.
Oh, Leo. Oh, Leo. Oh, Bixby's talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of.
Why didn't anybody use me?
This is like the Windows install. She's already talking to me. And then she went away. Oh, Bixby.
Can't she talk to Cortana now? Didn't I read that somewhere?
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah. It's crazy.
In case you want to, like, have them be friends.
You can say, like,
Keep
okay,
busy.
Bixby, hello, Siri, goodbye, Cortana. It's really stupid. Oh, Lord.
It's like three digital assistants walk into a bar.
I want to, before we go on to Edgium. Credge.
Right, which is slightly nicer than Credge.
So the whole theory that it had to do with Edgium is 20H1 is no, that was wrong.
No.
Yeah.
By the way, it doesn't mean it's not going to happen in that time frame.
Right.
This is just like Windows. Let's get started. Let's go. I'll guide
Would
you
you
through
set
the
up your
steps.
Samsung Galaxy with your voice?
Let's look at the terms and conditions.
Oh, let's look at the
Once you
terms.
read and agree to these, we can really get going.
Oh,
Wait a minute.
I wonder if she's going to
Did
read
Bixby-
me the terms and conditions. Wouldn't that
Hold
be
on a
fun?
sec.
I'll see you
Didn't Bixby
tomorrow.
have a guy's voice?
You
Is
did, but I
Bixby
think
a
this
woman?
is not Bixby. This is Bixby's little friend Lolita. I don't know. It's another voice in my machine. Can you imagine what it must be like for older people who haven't been paying close attention, and all of a sudden they get a phone. They went from their Nokia candy bar phone, and they get this, and all of a sudden it's talking to them. They'd probably throw it out the window. So there's a ghost in there.
I don't want this
My
talking
mother-
thing.
My mother got one of those Echo speakers, and she talks to it, and then she replies back to it after
That's
it's
right.
told her something. You know,
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you.
it's just
Alexandra.
yeah. My grandmother used
my
to
pants?
leave voice messages on my phone, and it would be like a letter. She'd say, "Dear Paul,"
Dear Paul.
and then she'd say whatever she was saying,
Sincerely,
and then she'd say,
Grandma.
"Love, Nana." Yeah, yep. It's sort of like that.
Oh, I love it. You know, we're
That's
all
how my
gonna,
mom used to do Facebook too, like on public facing.
Yeah,
She'd be
yeah,
like,
yeah.
"Love, Mom." I'm like, "Mom, no, that's not what you do on Facebook."
We have so we have my sisters and I have a thread called "Dad Wins the Internet Again," and it's always him going to Facebook and doing the wrong thing. So he'll go to his own feed and just say "Happy Birthday," and it's someone's birthday that's a friend of his or someone, but he just puts it on his thing and he has no
happy
idea what he's
birthday.
doing. So we always forward him around like, "Dad won the internet again today."
Oh,
It's just,
nah, you know, not to mock anything, but you know.
oh no, we're mocking him.
Yeah.
Let me be clear.
So, yeah, let's take a break because I need to play with my phone. So I'm going to let you do all of this stuff. And I noticed, by the way, Paul's wearing something in memoriam.
Oh yes,
Yes.
a band of sorts. You mean?
Yeah, we'll talk.
Oh, are you really?
Look at it.
Oh no,
like-
it's not the band.
Oh, it's not. The
I do.
Band.
I still
It's
have
a
one.
Band.
I actually
It's
still
not
have
the
one, but
band.
This is
I thought
a-
maybe you were wearing it like, you know, you might wear.
No,
a
I'm wearing one
black
that works, Leo,
armband.
but we'll get to that.
Oh, okay. It's over. Our show today brought to you by WordPress. I love my WordPress. For 12 years, I've been a WordPress. I got my chip, my 12-year chip at WordPress.com, and made me proud to know I've been using that longer than most people have been blogging. When I first started blogging, very early days of blogging, there wasn't really any great software out there, and I went through a bunch of different things. Of course, Blogger and There was something called gray matter. And I tried a lot of software, movable type. Then I found WordPress, and man, it was like all over. It's like, this is it. Except I didn't really get it at the time. I installed WordPress on a server, a great expense and time-consuming effort on my part. I did learn a lot about how the innards worked, and I set up a blog. But boy, when I found out that for less money than I'm paying, I could have a WordPress.com blog with all those features and not have to worry about updates or security or anything, I jumped. And here I am, I'm proud to say today, saying you need to do the same thing. If you don't have a site, a place on the web that's yours, and I'm not talking about that place Mark Zuckerberg made or the one Jack and Ev created. I'm talking about your own site, a site you can never be kicked out of, a site where all your stuff lives and you can get it at any time. You can upload audio, video, movies, pictures, text to your heart's content. And anytime you want to download it, you can do the same thing. That's what I call a real website. And you may say, well, I don't want to do that. That's too much work. Well, that's what I mean when I said I found WordPress.com. It's not. You don't need to know anything about web technologies. They do all that for you. All you have to do is put some content up there. And I tell you, what a easy, fun thing to do. They've got hundreds, thousands of themes to choose from so you can make it look your own. Customize it to your heart's content. 24/7 support. If at any point you have a question, there's a real expert, somebody who is a real WordPress expert just at the other end of the line, just ready to help you. 24/7. WordPress.com lets anybody pursue whatever they love by launching a site that's free to start with room to grow. HTTPS, sure, it comes with the territory. You don't have to do anything special. Just check a box. There are no 2-week trials. There are no hidden fees. And you own your own content forever. WordPress.com. It's built to grow with you, to get you where you want to be tomorrow. If you're an individual or a business, you need a website. You need a place on the web. It's really important for businesses, obviously. But even for, I always tell teenagers, once you get into high school, you ought to have a website. I tell my kids this. You have to have a website so that when people Google your name, they find you, not something somebody else put there in your name. The WordPress platform is so powerful and flexible. Some of the biggest companies on earth use it to build their websites. Ever been to Quartz? That's a WordPress site. Fortune? That's a WordPress site. And on and on and on. It's LeoLaporte.com. That's a WordPress site. That's my site. Millions of people use WordPress.com every day to turn their dreams into reality. I want you to as well. Go to WordPress.com/Windows. You'll get 15% off any new plan purchase. WordPress.com/Windows. For 15% off your new website. There's a reason 33% of the entire internet, this is not a made-up stat, this is genuine. Globally, 33%, 1/3 of the entire internet runs on WordPress because it's the best. WordPress.com/Windows. We thank them so much for their support of Windows Weekly. Edgium, we've got screenshots. We don't have to guess anymore. We know what it looks like.
Well, by the way, that said, I'm curious if it doesn't change.
Me too. Same.
Because this is not what I thought it was going to look like.
Oh, interesting. It looks
it's
like
early days.
Chromium.
Early days. It looks like Chromium.
Well, of course it does. It's
right.
It is Chromium, basically.
I mean, it looks like Chrome with some Microsoft touches, right?
Well, Chromium looks like Chrome too. So
Right.
Sure.
I mean, of course, they're going to integrate Bing and like the MSN news feed and things like that. But otherwise, a couple of people said to me, it looks like a browser.
Yeah,
it's a browser.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, but here's the thing. So look at some of the stuff that's blacked out in this screenshot.
This is from NeoWin. We should give him credit.
Yes.
Yep. The profile picture, which is blacked out, is interesting because in Google Chrome and in Chromium, you sign into your Google account from there. Mm-hmm. So does this mean that we're signing into our Microsoft account there and we're going to have a little Microsoft account picture there? It probably does.
Of course it does.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. This is interesting. And then, of course, the modern versions of Chrome have kind of a curved corners on all the rectangles, like the tabs are curved, the corners of the tabs. And on this product, they are squared off, which is how Edge does Chrome, does tabs. So I guess that's a little bit of a nod toward that. But yeah, it's
who did the blacking out here? Microsoft?
No, this is someone who took the shot, I guess.
And it didn't
Right.
want it to reveal who. Oh, maybe tell who he was. Somebody inside, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. So this browser, the Chromium version of Edge, is being tested pretty extensively inside Microsoft right now. Like the employees are testing
So
it.
they all have copy. I get it. Okay.
An employee could
Yeah.
have sent this to them, and they blacked it out.
Right.
This is,
But you know what's
from
curious?
March 4th, which is interesting.
We thought this, at least the first developer preview, would be out by now, right? To people outside of Microsoft.
Yes, we did. Now, that shot's
They
interesting, by the way, right there.
Yeah. Yep.
Because that looks a little bit like the settings pane in Edge today. I'm sure, well, not sure, but if you're familiar with the way that settings works in Chrome, this doesn't look anything like that. It looks nothing like this. So they have this, they've spent time on this, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
That dev thing is interesting right there, too. See the little green dev flag on the E?
Yeah.
Remember we had seen a leak about the Canary version, which was yellow.
Yeah.
So I think if I understand the different channels, dev is higher in the tree or closer to release, right?
That's
than
right.
Canary, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I know there's Canary is the most, alpha.
Like unstable and yeah.
And then I think it's dev. I think there's also
like beta,
probably. And then I think there's Chromium.
Yeah, like release or whatever. Yeah.
I can't remember. I used to run the Canary version, actually. It's usually
I did too. In fact, I did it last so I could experience the new material design stuff, if I'm not mistaken.
Chromium, let me just look on the Chromium project. Release channels. Yeah, there's stable, beta, dev, and Canary.
Stable, beta, dev, and Canary. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So this is dev, which means it's only one step up from Canary. The extension store is very complete, which is interesting. And these are all Chrome extensions, right?
But they're going to have their own store, right?
Right. So this looks like the way Microsoft does extensions today. And I guess I have not taken the time.
This looks like Chromium. This looks like the Chrome extension store to me. But then there's another one, which is just a grid.
I mean, if you bring up the Windows Store or the Microsoft Store in Windows 10 and go to, I think, extensions as a tab,
it looks the same. I'm on a
Mac. It looks just like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just a grid. It's just the style of the grid is the same. It's kind of hard to explain further than that.
Yeah. I'm just glad to see LastPass there, our sponsor.
They already have it, though, in Edge, don't they, LastPass, or no?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
And uBlock and AdBlock, all the ad blockers. And
Well, see, that's what's interesting. I didn't take the time to do this, but it might be worth going through the list and saying, are any of these not available in Edge today?
Right.
I don't know.
Possibly.
Yeah.
And then
I think some people were wondering if they were just going to not have their own store for extensions, right? Weren't some people thinking, well, since most of the extensions are going to come from Chrome, like why wouldn't you just use the Chrome extensions and Chrome extension store?
Well, because you want to brand it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I use Brave, which is based on Chromium, and even it has its own store.
Some quirks. Yep.
So that's just that's just the way it is, man. Okay.
So we are 2 months away from build. Do we think we're going to see this out in the wild before then, or do you think they just hold off and this is a build announcement? They're holding this for build.
You know, if they do it like they've been doing builds recently, they drop almost all the news like the week before build, and then they talk about it in more depth at build with developers.
Yep.
So they might do that.
Good.
I'm curious to see it, though. I'm very curious.
Well, I will use it. I mean, right?
Yeah.
I mean, why wouldn't you use it at this point? That's clearly going to be the browser of choice for Windows.
Yeah, but
no.
If you're already using Chrome and you have all your everything like your life tied up in Chrome,
that's what I'm wondering. So,
well, I'm sure it'll import all your stuff. I mean, when I moved to Brave, which is
but
it just imported everything.
I mean, Edge today imports everything from Chrome. If you want to make that transition, you can do it. And honestly, I don't know how, different people do things different ways, but I don't know how often you guys are updating your bookmarks or your passwords or whatever, but in some cases, a lot of those things kind of sit still for quite some time anyway. So it's not like you need a constant back and forth there. But yeah, I mean, one of the nice things about here's a little niggling problem, right? And Mary Jo, this is probably something you've noticed. It's really cool. If you store your passwords in Chrome and you use an Android phone, obviously your passwords and your bookmarks and all that stuff come out in Chrome on Android, but the passwords actually pass through to apps as well, and it's built into the system. And you can authenticate yourself to gain access to your password vault, and it just auto fills into apps. And so when you fill, I don't know how you did your Pixel 3 XL, but if you set it up as a new phone and you downloaded an app you've already used and there's a password associated with it, that would just happen automatically.
It did.
That's super, super useful.
It is.
Okay, well, now we get Chrome or Edge, whatever it's called, Edgium or whatever. And
the real name is going to be Edge, right? Like that's what it's going to be called.
No, of course.
Yeah.
But you sign in with your Microsoft account. You maybe import all of your bookmarks and your passwords and all that kind of stuff. And you go to a news site and you create a password, but now it's saved to your Microsoft account, right? So when you go to install that app, is that going to come over again? Because that goes to your Google account.
You're right.
I don't think so, right? That's just a weird little area, to kind of to wonder about. I'm not 100% sure, but it seems like that might be one issue there.
Yeah. Could they possibly work with people working in Chromium, like contributing to the project to try to head that off and make it work seamlessly? Is that even possible?
I don't know. I just don't know. I mean, technically I'm sure it is possible. I just don't know how that works. For example, I've been using this Huawei phone for a few months. And one of the many weird things about it is they have their own password vault on the phone. So my Google stored passwords don't come through to apps, right? And when I do put an app, a username and password into an app, it asks me if I want to save it to theirs. Now it's Chinese, so obviously I completely trust them. It's fine, but I don't have any
You're
way
sure.
Of course I do. Would you like my social security number? I mean, I've seen that problem. Yeah.
Well, do you remember? And I don't even know if this problem is fixed to this day, but when we first started using Android, and then you'd put Outlook for Android on your phone, and then you were trying to sync the password, the contacts between
it wouldn't work.
Messenger on your phone and your Microsoft contacts. It wouldn't even let you save the contacts. Do you remember that?
So that was a problem with the app, right? So the app was just poorly written.
Yeah.
There's nothing. Android and iOS both support this notion of accounts, and when you set up an email account in Gmail or Outlook today, it passes through to the OS. So it's the same sort of transaction. And the idea there is maybe you have a Gmail account, let's say, and you store all your contacts there. When you get a phone call, it knows which person it is because that contact list was in your Gmail account or wherever it was, so that's important. Like that made Outlook mobile more acceptable to far more people because now it's a first-class citizen on Android.
But it wasn't for a long time.
But it was not. That's true. Yeah. No, that was a huge problem for a long time, actually.
Yeah. That's why I use 9 on my phone still, because I was like, wait, what?
Yeah. No, it was really, it was just badly done.
So this is going to get in that same gray area, possibly, right? Like where you're like,
that's what I'm saying.
Where is
I think it is. I think, well, you're going to sign into your Microsoft account, right? And so a lot of us, especially people listening to the show, probably have Google and Microsoft accounts. You can manage those however you want or whatever. But for me personally, because my work account is Gmail based or Google based, whatever, my contacts that I actually use, right, are stored in Gmail or in Google, and my passwords are in Google. They just are. I mean, I could import them, and I have in the past. One point or another, imported them into Edge. But I see this problem on the iPhone, for example. That's another example. So Apple does things the same way, but the synchronization goes between Safari and iOS, right? If I have passwords stored in Chrome, iOS doesn't know anything about that stuff,
right?
So when it brings up its own little cute password thing where I can sign in with my thumb or my face, depending on the phone I have, it's going against the password list that it has in Safari. which is a small subset of the full password list I have.
Yeah.
I think this is going to be exactly the same problem.
I never even thought of that.
No one would. But if you're going to make this transition, I mean, you can periodically sync the the passwords, right? Assuming you trust the two places, Google and Microsoft. There's nothing preventing you from, if you're a Google-oriented person, you bring up Edge. I'm sure importing information from other browsers will be one of the first steps. You can choose passwords that will get it into your Microsoft account. And then, that way the browser will work with all the passwords you already have. And if you're using a phone, the passwords are already there. The trick is going to be when you go forward, maybe someday 2 weeks down the road or 2 months down the road, you either sign in for a new service or change your password at an existing service. And now you got to think, like, where did I do that? Because it's not going to work on the other one all of a sudden. And you may not quite understand why when it happens.
Okay.
It's not a slam dunk, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Good to know.
Yeah, it's just some, it's kind of one of the weird things to think about.
Yep.
Well, I can't wait. I, for one, embrace
our Edge future.
Browser overlords. The band, they broke the band up. The band is not getting together again. It's all over for the band. 2 years ago, it was over for the band. Why did Microsoft finally announce it? It's like it's.
You know what this is? This happens all the time in our space, especially the consumer stuff with Microsoft. This thing's dead. We've already mourned it. We've already had the funeral. We've moved on. We've all bought Fitbits or whatever we have. Yeah. And then Microsoft comes along and they rip the scab right off. And it just brings all that stuff back, right? And so we experienced this recently with Windows Mobile when Microsoft, they didn't actually announce anything, but they changed a product support page to say, oh, by the way, actually, they were kind of nasty about it, honestly. They November, whatever the date was, we are ending support for this product. Really recommend you use an iPhone or an Android phone. And, for a certain segment of the population, that's inflammatory, right? I mean, there's people who are like, I'm never going to stop using this thing. And, we have a lot of examples of this stuff happening. Zune, which became Xbox Music, which became Groove Music. You can load it up today. There's an advertisement for Spotify right in it. It's like getting punched in the face. If you cared about this stuff. Well, no, I mean, for me, like I explained earlier my issues with the whole Windows Phone thing. I mean, this is a lot like that because this thing, just like Windows Phone, was so full of promise. It was advanced at a time when existing trackers and smartwatches were stupid. It had all kinds of advanced features, which today, by the way, are very common. But back in 2014 or whenever this came out, they were not common. And it was, it was like this sensor-laden data collecting machine, and Microsoft made these promises. And I'll never forget. This is the one I always hold as the ultimate example of failure of band. This is like day one, the first thing they ever promised. They said, look, we have access to your fitness and health data, obviously from all the trackers on here, and we're going to track that stuff over time. But the other thing we have, which no one else has, is your productivity data, your schedule, right? And we're going to combine that stuff. They weren't talking AI back then, but today, this would be an AI conversation, right? We're going to use the magic of AI to examine what's happening to you personally and professionally, and we're going to proactively give you advice. So here was the example they used. Paul, we noticed every Monday morning you have a meeting at 9 a.m. And in the 30 minutes before that meeting, your heart rate is accelerated. You're really upset. And we're going to recommend that you do some mindfulness thing, meditation, deep breathing exercises, whatever it might be. And it was like, that sounds really awesome. They never did anything like that. Nothing. And so the other issue, we see this a lot in the Microsoft space with this kind of stuff, is they treated it kind of like a hobby. It was only available in the United States at first, and then mostly forever. It was only available sometimes. Remember, it was like often not even available for sale.
Yeah.
Other products started catching up, of course. What happens? And then it's a Microsoft product, so it had all kinds of reliability problems, right? Both versions of the band had problems with the strap, part of the strap, where the thing would fall apart. And they went to a completely different design for V2, and it fell apart just as easily as the first one. It's something they couldn't get right.
Yeah. But then the most frustrating thing was they actually were ready.
There's something worse?
Well, there's several, but
okay.
They were going to do a Band 3. Like they had the plan for the Band 3. I think they already had manufactured some prototypes of the Band 3. And then every time we asked them, like, are you guys killing the Band 3? They're like, oh, we have nothing to say about that. Like, we're not saying anything. And then they started saying, we're not making any more Band 2s. And I'm like, so what about 3? And they're like, no, we can't say anything about 3. We can't even say 3 exists. So
yeah.
Until this
weekend. It didn't run on Windows 10, right? Remember,
no, it never ran on Windows 10. Yep.
It never could. It was just too lightweight for that.
But until this weekend, they still had never said the band is dead. They had never actually officially said that.
Okay. Well, I moved on. Yeah. I think I bought a Fitbit in 2015 or whatever, moved on from there. But
I know. So, yeah. But that was frustrating to people because they said, well, did they actually ever say they killed the band? And I'm like, no, they never said that. They never
the other
ever
thing
said
is,
it.
I feel like, like the form factor, which is a little bit like this thing I'm wearing now, which is a Fitbit, right? So I feel like they hit at the exact right part of the market, right? Apple Watch was just coming out. It's bigger, it's like this big square thing on your wrist that exceeds the size of the band it's on. The battery life on that thing is terrible. It's 1 day, basically, maybe 2 if you're lucky. The Microsoft Band had the same problem. It was not focused. The Apple Watch was not focused on health and fitness for the first version. Remember, in fact, there was like a $10,000 luxury version. They were really going for kind of a high-end iPhone accessory kind of a market at the time. It was like a fashion statement. And I really feel like Microsoft came in at the right place. They kind of bridged the gap between traditional wearables like Fitbits and smartwatches. And they kind of came in right in the middle. And it's interesting to me that the Apple Watch, which is still much more expensive than the Band was, has really fallen into the same category. Yes, it does all this other stuff with music and whatever. But, I mean, honestly, they're really focusing on the health and fitness tracking stuff. And that's Microsoft was there, much, much earlier. And then, of course, Fitbit has caught up as well. And this thing I'm wearing is,
The other thing that gave some people false hope, I think, was they kept the health service that powered the band alive. And so people have said, okay, right.
That's classic.
So why are they keeping that around?
Well, I mean, honestly, it's health data. You can't just shut something like that off. I think that's part of it.
But they're going to. That's what they're going to do.
Yeah. No. Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, what I mean is you can't just say, hey, it's over. Like they're what they're announcing now is we're going to do this thing. This is coming.
And you can export your data. And here's how you could do that. So there was one surprising thing about all this. They're giving some band users a refund. That was surprising.
Yeah.
After 2 years?
Yeah.
Well, the idea here is if you're actually still using the thing today.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's, by the way, they do check that, right? They don't just...
Yeah, they can tell that you've been using it.
If it's been in a drawer for 2 years, it's not...
Well, yeah, I've got one in a box, right? Yeah. So if I pulled it out on March 1st and plugged it in, would I get a refund? No. If you've actually been using it, I don't even understand.
They probably know there's about 100 people. They probably know this is not going to cost them.
Everyone who uses a Windows phone still probably also uses the
right. Hey, if I had a Windows phone, I'd definitely use the Band.
Yep.
It's a matching set.
But so they're saying if your band's still under limited warranty, or if you are an active user, meaning you've worn it and synced the health dashboard since December, you can get a refund. But then they never tell you how you can get the refund. So I've had so many people writing to me saying, so how do I get the refund?
Well, first you have to send it in.
Yeah, but there's not even a link, right? Like to get a form or anything.
The number of Band 2s out in the world that are A, in use, and B, have not fallen apart has got to be in the double digits.
People have taped these things together. Yeah. Like you see people all the time with tape on them, like duct tape holding them together.
So this one honestly, it wasn't around for as long, but it had the same vibe to me as Windows Phone, where you could tell they had looked at this market, said we're going to do this thing right, we're going to go in a different direction. They had good ideas, They didn't follow through in any meaningful way, which was always irritating. And then they just kind of quietly, and then all of a sudden it's over, And unfortunately, this is a story again. If you're in the space like we are, it's getting a little too common and familiar. We're running out of consumer services we can screw people over with. Like they're going to have to announce a few more now. I don't know what they're going to do next.
Microsoft 365 Consumer is up next.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I really liked it, but I when I was looking forward to Band 3, I'd written an article about this is how Microsoft can fix the Band, and I listed out 4 or 5 major issues that I had with it, and then Fitbit announced the Alta, and I looked at the Fitbit Alta, and I was like, this is literally everything I was asking for, and so I got one, reviewed it, kept one, I kept it, and then this past year I upgraded to a Charge 3, but it's. This is a device that gets 7 days of battery life, right? As opposed to 1 or 2 days. It kind of treads the same middle ground, right, between smartphones and just basic wearables, right? It does all this stuff. It does, real-time heart rate, resting heart rate. It does sleep, actually pretty advanced sleep monitoring now, which is always really terrible news for me. I go to bed at like 10 and wake up at 6. It's like, congratulations, you slept for 5 hours. I'm like, I can do math. That's not what.
Is there a service behind it that they're going to switch off?
Yep.
Yeah, the health service.
So when are they going to switch that off?
Oh, what's the date? May 31, 2019. Is that right?
This year. Okay.
Yeah,
Soon.
this year.
All right.
Yep.
No, but you hit on something that I think is absolutely correct. They know how many there are, and there aren't many. They also know how many people are hitting the service. They know there aren't many. There's also the kind of promise that, remember, the point of Microsoft Health was that it will integrate on the back end with the services that are provided by your doctor, your whatever healthcare services.
Right.
Yep.
That didn't really ever materialize in any meaningful way.
Because honestly, that could have been really cool.
Yeah.
Well, the reason it's a shame, by the way, is that Microsoft is one of the few companies that I think people would trust with this kind of data, right? That one of the marketing wins for Apple is that they're one of the other ones, right? If there's some kind of an open question, would I trust Apple with my healthcare data? The answer is yes. Of course I would. Would I trust Google or Huawei or Samsung with that data? It's like, maybe. I mean, you could almost imagine like the advertisements that would appear on your phone because I'm chugging up a hill and I can barely make it. And now Google knows this and starts targeting me with whatever it is. And, like I know Microsoft's never going to do that, and I would trust that. And I'd also trust Apple to never do that. But Microsoft was there first. They could have had this, The problem with the Apple stuff is it's locked into the Apple ecosystem. I mean, the Microsoft thing ran everywhere. It was on Windows Phone, but it was also on Android and iOS.
Android and iOS, yep.
Yeah. I don't know. I always had this hope, too, that other wearable makers would integrate with this software, right, with the services, right? Because obviously creating this stuff is difficult, and Microsoft is in a unique position to do it well. And you could have some kind of a smaller company, maybe not Fitbit, maybe the misfits of the world or whatever, that someone, would come along and say, we're going to use Microsoft Health, and Band would only be one of the devices that you could use through that service.
Yeah.
But that never, to my knowledge, never happened at all. I think that was the point.
I think it was a goal. I think that was a
I think
plan,
so.
for sure.
I think so. I always feel bad about Band, It was a good product.
I know.
You were a fan,
I
right?
tried it.
I think Paul was a fan when it came out. I remember that.
I tried it. I wore it for a while. It was really big and bulky on a woman's wrist, at least on mine.
It was. You're right. No, it was. Yeah, my wife had one too, and
it wasn't that flexible, so it really kind of rattled around, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was like I don't wear a lot of jewelry, but like those kind of bangly bracelet kind of things where it probably moves on your wrist as you move. A lot of people would wear it so that the screen was on the inside of your wrist, which is, some people do that with watches. I think for the Band, they did it because it was actually a little more comfortable,
Yeah.
They tried.
Yeah.
Duct tape.
People do it. I've seen it.
I still have mine.
Yeah.
I know exactly where it is, but what exactly where it is in a bucket in the cellar. But I have
a bucket. Why a
like
bucket?
A bin,
Are you concerned about the lithium-ion batteries exploding?
No, it's
Actually,
in the
bucket would be the bad place to put it.
It's in a bin,
sand.
a plastic bin.
Oh, bin.
Full of
your special, no longer used device bin.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's like a first generation Surface pen in there. It's just full of stuff I don't know what to do
have
with.
that bin. It says, for the e-waste recycler.
Yes. Right. Wait until June 1st, 2019, and then just throw this thing. Yeah. If you don't need it by then, it's trash.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's sad. But you know what? This has been a decade of Microsoft kind of turning its back on initiatives and focusing on the cloud.
Yeah, and focusing on things that actually have a chance instead of things that are like,
But they never gave it a chance, and I actually think this thing had a chance, right? I mean, Microsoft really treated this one like an experiment.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, kid. It's not your night. Not my
purposely,
night.
They would say,
I could have been a contender. I'm sorry.
No, they just make like a limited number of them, and they're like, well, we're going to sell these, and we're going to see how this goes. And then there were people waiting to buy them, and they're like, oh, they'll come back eventually. And there were months like you couldn't even buy these things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I mean, you could make the same case on Cortana on home speakers, right? Like they even had a couple OEMs, including Harman Kardon, right? And then it was just like, we're not going to do that.
Forget about home speakers. I mean, what about just Cortana generally? Step outside of the United States and watch the feature list of Cortana dwindle down to next to nothing. True. You can tell the time and the weather. True. This is an ongoing problem, and bands suffered from exactly the same issue.
Yeah.
Well, now it's a band on the run.
It is. The band is broken up.
It's a band in a grave.
Our next piece comes to us. I'm guessing. I like to guess sometimes when I look at the links who wrote the article. I'm thinking it's a Paul Thurrott.
If you're referring to the Intel story.
Yes. It's interesting watching Intel follow Microsoft down the same path to the future. So what do you mean by that, Thurrott?
Yeah. So Microsoft used to be Windows-centric, right? And there was a Windows-only policy there. Then it became Windows First. And eventually they diversified a little bit. I would say today they've diversified quite a bit. If you look at the way the company is structured, they've got all kinds of things going on. A lot of it falls into the cloud computing category. But it is interesting to me, I point this out every quarter, that the business inside of Microsoft responsible for all of its legacy stuff, especially Windows, is the biggest moneymaker they have. But they push this other stuff because that's the future, and it is the future. So Intel, the new Intel CEO, I think his name's Bob Swan, gave an interview right up on top of Mobile World Congress, or MWC as we're supposed to call it now. And he was talking about how Intel basically is doing exactly the same thing. And what they're doing is talking about all of the markets that Intel's trying to address in the future. So mobile of all kinds, meaning chipsets for phones and wearables and IoT and data centers, automobiles, connected devices of all kinds. And, it's like on and on and on and on. Lots of talk about all this kind of stuff. And I thought to myself, you know what? I bet if I look at Intel's earnings, I'll look at the most recent quarter. It's going to be all PC, right? This is where all their money is. But the theory is, and by the way, that's true. In fact, it's even worse at Intel. They're not as far along as Microsoft is in diversifying their businesses. I think it's 52% of their revenues come from PCs right now. But what they said was very interesting, because this is the conversation that we had on this podcast maybe 3 to 5 years ago, when we were talking about how this new Microsoft under Satya Nadella was going to open up to other platforms and to open source and be this kind of different kind of a company. And at the time, the theory was, look, Microsoft dominates in PCs, 90% of the PC market. That used to be 90% of the entire personal computing market. But today, we have tablets, we have smartphones, we have wearables, we have smart devices in homes. Computers are actually now the minority platform in many ways compared to some of these other things, especially smartphones. And so the theory here is that Microsoft will be one of many players in this bigger market. It will never dominate like it did at the time, but it can emerge on the other side of it as a bigger company that was when it was dominant, right? And you can kind of do the math on how that could work out. Well, the CEO from Intel did exactly that math. He called it the TAM, the total addressable market. He said, we're X% in PCs, but PCs are only X amount of dollars. This other bigger thing that we're shooting for is 5 times as big. We're going to be a tiny company. We have much more competition in this market, Qualcomm and Apple and so forth. But we can emerge on the other side of it as a bigger company. I thought, wow, that story sounds really familiar. So I did the comparison. I went and looked at Intel's earnings. I looked at Microsoft's earnings. You look at the legacy business versus the new stuff. And what I discovered is that they are following Microsoft on the same path. They're just not as far along. And so I thought it was kind of interesting that the CEO just kind of spelled it out explicitly, exactly the way we had that conversation about Microsoft years ago.
Well, it's worked for Microsoft. Maybe it's not a bad idea.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so here's what's worked for Microsoft. They are a more diverse company, right? They are much more able to withstand, I think, a hit to one of their bigger businesses, that because they have these other things going on. The question remains whether those other businesses will ever be as big as the big 3 legacy businesses they had in the past, which were server, Office, and Windows. I think that they kind of almost inevitably would have to be. But it's still kind of hanging in the balance, right? Azure, it does not sit in a market by itself like Windows basically did. Office 365 doesn't, and Microsoft 365. They have a lot of competition. So I guess we'll see what happens.
Plus, the profit margins are so different, right? I mean, you really have to make some serious investments to be one of the leading cloud providers, right?
Oh, well, it ain't cheap to
centers.
build a fab. I mean,
that's true. It's not. But
those are very capital intensive.
True.
Yeah. But Intel was able to coast for many years, just like Microsoft did, by the way, in the past, because the competition wasn't that strong at different periods of time. Intel has examples of times where they have stepped up to the plate when the competition showed up, and Microsoft did too. And so they've done that. But it's hard to see the future. Obviously, I don't pretend to have any real understanding, but Intel and Microsoft dominated in personal computing for decades in a way that will have no parallel, I don't think, in the future. And people in the future who know those companies will have a hard time understanding how powerful they were, how without peer they were. It's just, it's interesting watching them trying to adapt to the new world.
Ben Thompson, back in June of last year, wrote a really good article on what went wrong at Intel. And I think it also is analogous to what went wrong at Microsoft. And it really it has to do with success, right? When you're successful, it's hard to you protect. You protect.
Yep. No, it doesn't help you to invent new markets. You don't. We have a cash cow here. We're gonna milk this thing.
Intel, established an integrated approach, which made them less nimble, and then they also kind of ignored specialized processors. They stuck with x86 and general purpose chips, and they got eaten alive by ARM and GPU manufacturers. And
that's right. It's weird because even if you look just at the PC space, honestly, they've done a pretty terrible job in adapting to what we're now calling like an always connected PC. They've always done pretty well scaling up, performance-wise and all that kind of stuff, but meeting the needs, even within the PC space, of like thin and light computers, fanless designs, super power efficiency, fast cellular modems, that kind of stuff. They're really bad at it. Yeah. They're just really bad at it. They keep plowing ahead.
Here's what the paragraph I think that's Ben wrote that's most interesting. It's perhaps simpler to say that Intel, like Microsoft, has been disrupted. The company's integrated model, that is lockstep design and fab, resulted in incredible margins for years, and every time there was the possibility of a change in approach, Intel's executives chose to keep those margins. Right. In fact, Intel has followed the script of the disrupted even more than Microsoft. While the decline of the PC finally led to the end of Windows, Intel has spent the last several years propping up its earnings by focusing more and more on the high end, selling Xeon processors to cloud providers. That was good for quarterly earnings, but it meant the company was only deepening the hole it was in with regards to basically everything else.
He's got some good ideas.
And you're right. And then Microsoft pivoted. They recognized the end of the PC and the end of Windows.
Well, remember, we had this conversation.
Yeah.
Right. We have to give Microsoft some credit. Companies in their position don't usually move this quickly and effectively to change their course, right? And Intel is an example of what usually happens. I mean, I don't think Intel's a particularly bad company. I think this is what typically happens. The miracle of Microsoft is that they saw what was happening and moved aggressively to counter it, you know?
Yep.
And I think that will be the story that will be written in the future when Microsoft is still around and Intel isn't or whatever.
He has a great line in here. He says, the corporate culture is an organization's greatest asset right up until it becomes a curse.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
No, we talk about this. I mean, we joke about this, right? You know, and we are joking, but we, you know, oftentimes we'll say, you know, we missed that Microsoft that was so aggressive and belligerent and horrible to competition and blah blah blah. And you know, we are joking, but that's a cultural shift, right? When you talk about going from embrace and extend just to embrace, there isn't a bigger cultural shift that could ever occur.
And now they're open sourcing Calculator. My God.
What's next?
It's like getting bamboo jammed under your fingernail, you know?
It is, really, Paul. That's how you
That's why
feel.
Paul's wearing his Fitbit, and his heart rate went up as soon as that post
Exactly.
went
What
up.
does it say? 142. Is that
bad?
bad?
You're just sitting there. If you were wearing an Apple Watch, it'd say, "Excuse me, I think you're dead."
Yeah. Oh, Apple Watch would have called 911.
Yeah,
There would have been
I'm
like
calling
an emergency.
911, dude.
Yeah.
You haven't moved in 5 hours.
Exactly.
I'm just playing Call of Duty, man. Let's talk. Actually, if you want your heart rate and blood pressure to go up, let's talk USB.
Okay, I don't want to beat this one to death. I'll just go through this one quickly because they're so infuriating. But there's something called the USB Promoters Group. I picture them looking like a class photo from Barnum and Bailey Circus, like a bunch of guys.
I'm thinking, you know.
Yeah, just clown noses and honky horns and stuff. So these idiots brand USB in such a way that it's impossible to know what's going on with USB. It's amazing, but they've been moving forward with USB standards. We know that we have different port types. Like there's a Type A port, which is the full-size port, the Type C port, which is a small reversible port. And then there are different capabilities that are associated with USB, including data transfer, which has gone in USB 3.x from 5 to 10 and now to 20 gigabits per second. We also know that, confusingly, there's this other thing called Thunderbolt 3, which offers, among other things, Thunderbolt 3 is amazing, but 40 gigabit per second data transfer speeds. Thunderbolt 3, unlike previous versions of Thunderbolt, adopted the USB port, right? So Thunderbolt 3 is delivered through a USB-C port. Because PCs are terrible and PC makers are terrible, you could have a computer that has multiple kinds of PC ports with different capabilities. You can today have a PC with the same port that has different capabilities. You could have 3 USB-C ports. One of them has Thunderbolt 3. One of them is power only. One of them does USB-C, but it's different capabilities with, display, whatever. It is the most confusing mess in the history of mankind. So, to make things even more confusing, within the span of 1 week, the USB Promoter Group has announced USB 3.2, which will not be called USB 3.2, by the way, but let's just call it that, which doubles the data transfer speed, I think, from 10 to 20 gigabytes per second. And then this week, they announced USB 4. By the way, no space between USB and 4 in that one. There is a space on the other one because, again, these guys are idiots. It is essentially Thunderbolt 3. So, in other words, they're essentially wrapping the capabilities of Thunderbolt 3 into USB-C, which is fine, which is great. Why do both? Who knows? But this is what I want. I would say one thing that Apple has done right historically is when we went from USB 2 to 3, they just put USB 3 ports in their computers. They're like, we're not going to do both. We're not going to be like a PC maker and have a black port over here and a blue port over here, and the users have to figure out which one works. And, USB-C is uglier because there are huge incompatibilities. And these span. We don't have enough time to talk about all the weird incompatibilities with USB-C, but they extend to phones too, by the way. Like I know when you buy a USB dongle for a headphone adapter, it will work on some phones. It won't work on others. You get one with your Huawei phone. It doesn't work on your Google phone. The Google one doesn't work on the OnePlus phone. I have no idea what's going on with that stuff, but huge problems. We don't even have color coding anymore, so there's no way to tell if a USB-C port does Thunderbolt 3 unless you look at the little glyph on the side of the metal with a little lightning thing, because lightning is the same as thunder, by the way, but whatever. So it's just a mess. The point is it's a mess. So what I would like to see these people do is just say, this is USB. It's 4. It's Thunderbolt 3. Every port in every computer going forward is just going to have everything in it. I don't know why they don't just do that. I know that it's related to money. I also suspect strongly it is a matter of cents of savings per port per computer. I don't understand why we have all. Can you imagine any other business where they've made something better and they keep providing the older, crappier version alongside, in many cases, the new one on a product? Why would you? What is going on with this? So this is our world of USB. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, USB-C has always been a nightmare because that one port could do. There was no way of looking at it and saying what it could do. It could just be for power. Exactly. It could be for data. It could be for video.
Right. At least in the past, we had color coding, so you knew. Yeah. But putting the onus on the user to understand the color of the port means a speed thing is the dumbest.
No.
Stupid, I never even knew that. I never I didn't even know what the colors were. You didn't know the blue one?
Yeah.
No.
I think that honestly I know, Paul, it's confusing at this point, but we're making progress because it's all going to be Type C. It's all Type C. And if we can unify around USB 4 on Type C, which is essentially Thunderbolt. That's right. Things will be better. It'll be cuckoo for a bit.
It has been cuckoo for a bit. It will continue to be cuckoo. I guess what I'm asking for is what you're saying. It's the future. In other words, here's the port. It does all of those things always.
Right.
Always. It doesn't matter if you don't need it. It's like touch on a computer. It doesn't matter. It's just there. Mm-hmm. Just don't worry about it. If you don't want to add 2 monitors at 60 hertz and 4K, it doesn't matter. It's just there if you ever need it. If you don't need it, it's cool. Because otherwise you find yourself like, you plug stuff in, you the video's not coming out, you plug it into the other one, and then it works. Why?
Very hard. For consumers, it's really crazy.
Yeah. For normal people, it's just a mystery. Like you plug it in, you're like, doesn't work in this one. Yep, works in this one. No why. I don't know why.
Yep. Crazy. It's crazy.
There's also another issue, which is kind of a separate a sideline, but we talked about this yesterday, which is the dangers of direct memory access, of DMA. And Thunderbolt 3 offers DMA. In other words, it's basically an external port that gives you access to the internal bus. And if protections aren't there, you can use it to exfiltrate stuff from RAM, including passwords and everything else. And Steve was pointing out that a lot of operating systems, well, I'll give you, here's the weird one. Windows 10 Pro and Home do not have the mitigations that prevent this, but Windows 10 Enterprise do. So Steve said, turn off Thunderbolt 3 until, unless you need it, because the risks of it are, somebody coming along with what looks like a USB key with Thunderbolt 3, plugging it in and sucking all your memory out.
We should not lose sight of the magic of this port, right? Especially with the Thunderbolt 3 capabilities.
And DMA is what gives you all that speed, but
the ability to do an external graphics
you couldn't
processor,
do any
it's incredible.
Yeah.
Drive 2 4K displays at 60 hertz, right? And have some kind of external drive connected, and have a dedicated GPU on an external box. And then do all the normal USB stuff, keyboard, mouse, whatever you might want to do, webcam, whatever it is. I mean, it's incredible. And, they figured out a way to completely screw it up because they're terrible. They're so terrible. Every company in the chain is terrible, All
right, I'm going to talk about something happy now because I saw a picture yesterday of Mary Jo Foley in a very attractive hat. Where did you get that fascinator?
That was a pretty cool little fascinator there.
It was. You could go to a royal wedding in that.
I could have. So I get to try the HoloLens 2, finally.
Yay.
It's not really a finally. I'm trying it ahead of 99.9% of people.
Yeah, remember that. I only kind of randomly went to Mobile World Congress. Most people did not.
I know.
You know,
it just still
Paul,
feels
did you
because
try it there? Did you get to try
yeah,
it?
he got to try it. Oh, it's old news to him. He tried the whole thing.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna.
In fact,
I'm gonna go make a sandwich while you talk about this.
All right. No, because I actually have a very crazy story about me trying it that is super interesting. So, the field of view is way better. It's much taller. Like it doesn't feel like you're looking through a little mail slot anymore, which is great.
I agree.
And now you can manipulate holograms with your hands, as everyone's talked about. Except I could not. And so
do you have abnormally small hands?
No, my hands are actually pretty
problems.
big. Yeah, so because I wear progressive glasses, and it goes right over your glasses fine, and it feels very comfortable now. But I walked up to the hologram, and I was like either going right through it or like being too far back.
I would have
the
same problem.
Yeah, so they were watching me do this, and they're like, go up to it. And I'm like, I'm up to it. And they're like, no, you're not. And so then I'd like move forward and I try to grab it and they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, trying to grab it, but I don't feel like I'm getting it. And then I realized suddenly, oh, it's because I have progressives where if I look up, I see distance and down, I see close. And so I couldn't get my head right to see the exact level of where the hologram was.
But depth perception shouldn't be impacted by that. Can you
I don't know what it was.
Can you go? Well,
but
I
remember,
can talk about it. Can you go with your fingers? Can you go like this and match your fingers up? Oh, look, you can't. You are having a depth perception issue, Ms. Foley.
Yeah.
I do too, and I'll tell you why I do. Paul can do it. Yeah. The reason I do, and I don't know if this is the same as you, but I don't have binocular vision. I use one eye at a time. Both eyes work totally. If I'm looking to the left, I'll use the left eye. If I'm looking to the right, I'll use the right eye.
Wait a minute. What? What's this called?
I don't know, but it was probably related.
So wait, is this something? So, I'm sorry to interrupt, but is this something that happened at middle age, or was this something you've
had? I've had it since birth. I had a lazy eye. I had a strabismus, and I think it's related to that. But normally, what happens at birth, babies are like that, is you learn to integrate your two eyes, and so. I can do that. My eyes will integrate if something's pretty close, but if it's a distant, I actually use a lot of tricks, unconscious tricks, to do depth perception. So I can drive and I don't walk into walls, but and a lot of it is shifting your vision very rapidly back and forth so that you simulate binocular vision and so forth. I bet you should ask your optometrist, your ophthalmologist, Mary Jo, because if you can't do that, you don't have depth perception. I can't.
This is kind of weird watching her try to do it.
Yeah.
So
it's not the glasses.
It was crazy. No, it was crazy because I'd go up to the hologram and I'd be like trying to grab it, and they're like, "No, you're not grabbing where it is." And I'm like, "I feel like I am." And so then they were watching me, and Greg is like, "Do you wear progressives?"
Can you shoot a basketball? I mean, what?
Yeah, well, you'd probably be terrible as I was at baseball and basketball.
I know you don't drive, and I think we can all say thank God for that. But
yeah, you could say that for a lot of reasons.
Where would this be a problem in day-to-day life?
Sports for sure.
Yeah.
But luckily, that doesn't matter to me. Sports,
and it could be driving, but the human brain is a remarkable thing, and it learns to compensate.
Yeah. Right.
But you're in an unusual situation the brain is not trained to do, and it probably is having trouble.
Yeah, it was just the weirdest thing because I could see the holograms and I'd start walking up to them, but I'd go either too far or too close, and they were watching me and they're like, "What are you doing?"
So what I do, and what you might try when you're wearing HoloLens, is go like this.
Yeah.
Shake your head back and forth like that.
Does that knock your eyeballs together and it kind of gets them in sync? Or
I'm joking.
Does that work? Exactly?
But actually, there is what do they call that when your eyes are moving rapidly back and forth all the time? It's not perceptible. There's a name for it. I can't remember.
Yeah, there is.
But I think that's part of the mechanism that my brain uses to get some depth perception.
So, Mary Jo, your glasses, that you got these at some age, right? Like as you got older, you needed that. Yeah. Is that what happened? Because everyone has that problem, right, at middle age. At some age, it's different for everybody. all of a sudden you can't read a book, and like a lot of people will get like
that's just
reading
farsightedness, though. That's not.
Well, no, it's very common. Like you need reading glasses to see a menu or something.
Yeah.
So your solution is, what do you call them? The lenses are called what?
Progressives.
Progressive, because you wear glasses.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is all normal. Don't you wear reading glasses, Paul? You're older.
Well, no. So my doctor's solution to this problem for me, because for years I would go in every year and she'd say, "Okay, you having a problem yet reading the menu?" And I'm like, "No, it's fine." And then one year it was like over, And what they decided to do was, if you think about your prescription, one of my eyes is one kind of notch up on the prescription, and one is one down, and so your eyes compensate. And so when I read a menu, I can read it. And if I'm watching TV, I can see it. It's fine. Right. But if I actually close one eye, right, I can tell which eye I can see the TV clearly. So if I have something,
I do that. You have you got monovision contacts.
Now I do, but with contacts.
Yeah. No, I had no problem. This is my reading eye and this is my distance eye, and it worked. Yeah. I took no time to adjust to it because I never used both eyes at a time anyway.
I find it alarming when I do this and I can realize which one's which. I don't like that one of them is a little blurry and different. But it works, and I had no problems with the HoloLens. So it's kind of
no. She's got depth. That's a separate thing. It's not presbyopia. It's not presbyopia. It's a depth perception issue.
You might want to see a doctor.
You might want to see a physician. No. Just next time you go in for your glasses, ask them.
Yeah. Anyway, what's cool is they're going to start looking now.
Pokes yourself in the eye.
Yeah, they're going to look at Microsoft now and just see, is there an issue for many people wearing progressives? Because
I don't think it's that.
It's one of those weird cases.
I think it's depth perception. It's one of the reasons if I do 3D of any kind, VR, I have to actually consciously go out of focus a little bit, and then I can combine the two images. You need binocular vision for VR, and I bet it's true for AR. So
do you have problems in VR?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I get a headache. And
oh, really?
In a movie, I can kind of if I get drunk and I kind of sit like this and defocus, I can see it, but I can't see 3D as well as a normal person can by any means. Yeah.
That could be my issue. But
do you like 3D movies?
I've seen a 3D movie before, and I don't remember.
Does it look 3D to you?
It was 1985.
Yeah.
Alan
One Eye was red.
The Lost City of Gold.
Yeah.
I don't go to the movies that much, but
well, maybe you don't have depth perception issues. I don't perception issues.
I don't know. But whatever it was, I had a surprising amount of trouble manipulating the holograms, and I was surprised because, man, this gesture to me was impossible to do that we used for HoloLens 1. So I was so excited about, we can just touch them now. But then
you didn't know where it was in space.
I didn't.
Honestly, it's tricking you, right? Because it isn't.
Yeah.
Right. So it didn't fool you. That's all.
I don't think I had a problem with that. Did you ever? So one thing I did have a problem with was it does eye tracking, right? So when something's up there, you can just kind of look. But I found it hard not to move my head, right? You kind of naturally look that way at stuff. And they kept saying, you don't have to move your head. You don't have to move your head. You stop moving your head.
I don't think I moved
Seriously,
my head.
I'm gonna hold your head. I can't. It's hard for me not to move my head.
It was cool. The ability to look at text in a hologram and scroll with your eyes. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So you're reading a piece of text, and then when you get to the bottom with your eyes, it sees you're at the bottom, and so it just scrolls up.
Yeah. It's pretty good.
Cool. Yeah.
Yep.
So it's way more comfortable, better field of view. I just had a heck of a time manipulating the holograms.
Would you agree? So the field of view was obviously the big problem with the first version.
Yeah.
We can't pretend that they've solved it. I mean, obviously there is still a field of view, but I agree with this. It's much taller. I feel like this is no longer an issue, right?
Yeah.
Not that they shouldn't continue to work on it or whatever, but to me, that was the burning problem. And I feel like they really just nailed it. It's the way it should be.
Yeah, it's way more, it's just normal. Like when you're looking now, you don't feel like you're peeking through something really small. You feel like I'm just looking inside of a rectangle, but it's an acceptable size rectangle.
Like you were in a tank looking out at a little, what's going on out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it was cool. It was fun to try it out. sounds like we'll hear more soon. It sounds like it's definitely going to ship this year. I mean, like they've got the hardware pretty much done.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. Yeah, I thought it was great.
Yeah, I was happy I got to try it. Just because, you think, oh, I know what it's going to be like. But until you actually put one of these things on and see what it is like, you don't really have a good sense.
Listen, I obviously made kind of a big deal out of the mail slot thing with the first version. So I had a lot, I had a lot riding on this one. So as I put this thing on my head, I was just thinking to myself, like, please don't suck. Please, like,
be good.
Don't
right?
you dare look like this. Like, because if it is, I don't even know how I'm going to react to this.
Yeah.
And it was great. Like, it was great.
Look
And
how happy
that
Mary
was,
Jo is.
I know.
She's smiling.
Yeah. I was smiling.
That was
I was
before
like,
you
that's
tried
fun.
the gestures.
No, that was
Right.
after even.
Oh.
And it was frustrating because I was like, I see it. I want to grab onto it and I can't.
Yeah, they're going to have to figure that out. I mean, because I know I have trouble with depth perception, I don't expect it to be perfect. I was able to use Magic Leap fairly well.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
actually, come to think of it, I wasn't.
Oh, you were? Huh.
Well, some of the Magic Leap stuff was just you look at stuff.
Yeah.
That I could do. But I don't know if I was able to do I don't even know if there was any reaching. I don't think they did have any gestures. It was all looking.
Right.
Yeah, the hand tracking and eye tracking on this it's just like so amazing.
When you held your hands out, you
it's
could
good.
see them and it could see. That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I
it
like
is.
that. Yeah.
Yep.
It didn't have a problem. You did.
Right. Right. It saw me fine.
It was working great. Very interesting. Yeah. I can't wait.
Yeah.
Let's see. Xbox news. Now we know why Mary Jo doesn't like Xbox.
Why?
Because she's blind.
Because she's blind.
I like this comment. Hold on. I have to add this. Mary Jo, how can you have depth perception when you've never spilled your beer? Good question, Mike.
Yeah. You don't miss your mouth.
I don't. Well, sometimes, but that's usually after.
I was going to say, wait a minute.
Where is that beer?
People behind her are soaking wet, but yeah, she's never missed her mouth. I have never seen you miss your mouth.
No.
I guess no. I probably have more experience with you drinking beer than many. You've been.
Do you drink
fairly
beer
accurate.
now, Paul, or are you still off the beer?
No.
You do not?
I don't think I'll. I bet I never drink beer again.
Oh, my God. Isn't that depressing? And pizza? You'll never eat pizza again?
I have eaten pizza. In fact, last August I had pizza, and I said to my wife, maybe this could be a quarterly thing. Pizza's awesome. Pizza's really good.
It is.
I scrape the top off and just eat
I've
that,
done that.
which is fine.
Yep. Yeah, my daughter orders a white pizza, and I just eat the cheese off the top like a
savage.
like a cat. I don't know, something weird. I don't know.
This is interesting. This news about the new Xbox is intriguing to me.
Yeah, so in the coming months, there's going to be a bunch of Xbox news. We have events that are coming up like GDC and then E3 this summer, and some of it's tied to that. The first story we have today is about the notion of a diskless Xbox One S, e.g. an Xbox One S without an optical drive, right? That one, I think, is going to be announced in April and will be released in May. And it's probably going to be released alongside, or announced rather, at a Microsoft virtual event that's occurring in April. So it's not going to be like an industry event or whatever. And it has a terrible name. Right now, they're going to be calling it the Xbox One S All Digital Edition. But the thing I'm going to be looking for when they announce this is two things. Whether it has a cost-reduced innards, which they do every couple of years, they replace the console. And we can expect an Xbox One S in the fall that has, the optical drive, but the same inside. So I'm curious about that aspect of it. But also any data they have around the percentage of people who have Xbox Ones that don't buy games on disc, right? For me personally, that was like the big thing moving from the Xbox 360, which started out as pure disc-based gaming, like traditional gaming, and then ended its life with a lot of digital stuff. With the Xbox One, you can, and I have, exist solely digital only. I have never purchased a game on a disc on this platform. I've only put discs in it just to kind of test like Blu-ray movies kind of stuff for work. But I think this future is here. I think this is good timing for this. So this is a smart addition.
They could call it the Xbox One No Moving Parts Edition.
Yeah, right. I mean, well, unfortunately, Xbox One still uses a platter-based hard drive. Another thing, actually, so that factors into
the NvMe drive doesn't replace the platter hard drive.
So, sorry, that's a different product. So, this summer they're expected to announce the next Xbox One console, meaning the 4th generation version, and that one will probably have a disc as well as I don't know if they'll have a no disc version, but if you think about the original Xbox One and then you go to the S, which added HDR capabilities and 4K, but not for gaming, and then the Xbox One S, which added 4K for gaming. What's the next logical progression for the platform? And I think what it is 4K at 60 frames per second, regardless of game, right? And I think that's what they're shooting for.
Okay.
Part of the performance that goes toward that will be moving away from traditional hard drives and moving to some kind of SSD, preferably NvMe. So hopefully that's what they do. But that is the rumor right now. So
the all-digital edition is not that.
No, in fact, it's the top of the line today is Xbox One X. The discless, the all-digital version, is an Xbox One S, right? That's the white console. That's the non-4K gaming console.
Okay.
Yeah. So 2 different things, but one should be announced in April. The other one should be announced in June.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's all?
That's all.
That's
actually, there was some Xbox Game Pass news, but I wanted to cut Mary Jo a little slack, so we'll move along.
All right, let's take a break, and then we're going to go to the back of the book. How about that? How about them apples? Our show today is brought to you by LastPass. I'm actually running out of the studio after the shows today to go down to San Francisco for the LastPass cocktail party at RSA. I'm looking forward to that. And if you're at RSA today, just to go to the LastPass booth and say, what's the password? And they'll give you the password in a location. It's going to be at Bourbon and Branch in San Francisco, which is fun because Bourbon and Branch is a speakeasy that you have to have a password to get in. There's no front door, and when you go in, there's a secret bookcase you go through, and now you're in the. It's really cool, and it's going to be a fun party. We did it last year. I'll be there along with Megan. And Jason will be coming down with me. So that's going to be a lot of fun. But even if you're not in San Francisco for the big security conference, you ought to know about LastPass. LastPass is all about security. It's the #1 password manager. And I'm figuring anybody who listens to the show probably uses LastPass. I mean, if you're not using a password manager, you're taking a huge risk. These days, we need to know a lot of passwords. I mean, honestly, we're not designed to know hundreds or remember hundreds of passwords. People address that problem in a number of ways. I know a few people, close family members, who just use the same password over and over. This, we know, is a very, very bad idea. Yesterday, we were talking on security. Now, Steve Gibson said it's estimated that about half the traffic on the web is bots. Not just Google, spidering the web. Bots who are taking databases of known passwords and trying them on every site. See, once the bad guys, get the Target breach or the Equifax breach or whatever that breach and get a password for that site, they send their bots out to try every site in existence using your email and password. And if you use the same password over and over, they're going to get into every one of those. So there's a problem right there. And also, people use easy-to-guess passwords because usually easy-to-guess means easy to remember. So they use their dog's first name and their birth date and their kids' middle initials and that kind of thing. And those are very easy to brute force. So we really got to clean up our password hygiene. LastPass helps you do that. Its built-in password generator will let you generate a really good, random, long, strong password as long as you want, as long as the site will accept. with any combination of upper and lowercase and punctuation and numbers. It's always hard to remember. But that's the point of LastPass. LastPass is going to remember it for you. All you have to do is remember the one password, the last password you have to remember, and that gets you into your password vault. Actually, if you're a Microsoft Active Directory company, you just use your Active Directory credentials, and you're in LastPass. We use LastPass Enterprise here. I use LastPass at home. I have since they've been started, which is about 10 years. I used it for a long time. Then Steve Gibson interviewed Joe Segrist, its creator. Joe showed him like a peek behind the kimono and showed him how everything works. And Steve gave it 2 thumbs up. He uses it now. We started using it for the business when one of our engineers posted all his passwords on an open website so he wouldn't have to remember them. That was great, but it was also very easy for others to find. So we took that site down and put everything in LastPass. I mean everything. My social security numbers, every one of my family members' social security numbers, my passport, my driver's license. I stored it all in LastPass. That's my secure store because LastPass is fully encrypted, strong encryption. It's only decrypted on device level. Even the LastPass folks can't get access to it. You have a LastPass authenticator, and if you're doing the LastPass Enterprise, I really strongly recommend. They have about 100 policies you can implement, and Russell, our IT guy, has turned on a lot of them, including the requirement for 2-factor authentication. That's good for our business. It means, even if an employee shares a password, it's no good to that other guy unless they have the authenticator code. LastPass's authenticator is great because it doesn't give you a number. It gives you just an approve deny button. I really like that feature. LastPass also means you don't have to tell employees passwords at all. You can share a site. You can say, you have folders, our business department. Everybody in the business department has access to, let's say, our QuickBooks, right? But it doesn't mean they know the password. They have to click the link. It opens it up, logs them in, but they don't ever see the password. They just see those dots. So they can't share the password. We can change it easily. We can revoke it, and nobody loses access. We store SSH keys in there, database logins, software licenses, all our business information. It is zero knowledge, and that's what you want. Look, I can go on and on. I want you to just know LastPass is out there. You're probably already using it. That's the LastPass Premium for personal use. Maybe you're using LastPass Families. That's what I use at home. I love emergency access, which lets me identify somebody, my wife in this case, as my kind of executor if I should become disabled. And she needs to get access to my bank accounts and things. She can. She requests it from LastPass. LastPass sends me an email, and I set the time for a week, but you can choose how long it is. If they don't hear from me within a week, I must be disabled. And so they give her the password. She can log in. That's really important. I know we don't want to think about these things, but that's really valuable. They have a great security check tool, too, which will go through all your passwords. In fact, now when I log in, LastPass will say, oh, use that password on another site. Better pick a different one. I just love LastPass. If you've got a small team, there's LastPass Teams, 50 or fewer people. We use LastPass Enterprise. 13.5 million people use LastPass. Protect yourself and protect your business, too, with LastPass for Enterprise, the #1 most preferred password manager, trusted by over 43,000 businesses. LastPass.com/twit. I almost feel like, don't tell them this. But this is as much a public service announcement as it is an advertisement because I am a big believer. LastPass.com/twit. And if you're at RSA, we'll see you tonight at Bourbon and Branch. Now, let's go to Paul Thurrott. It's the back of the book. Paul's got his tip of the week.
Good news, by the way. Mark Zuckerberg said today that the future of Facebook is privacy-focused.
Oh, so that's a relief.
You can all come running back to Facebook.
I might reactivate my
That's
account.
My tip. And then the app pick is Facebook, which is a great app for
stop
privacy.
It. By the way, it's my #1 peeve about Samsung's Galaxy S10.
Yeah.
Facebook's pre-installed.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, I disable it immediately, but it just bugs the hell out of me.
Yep. Well, if you want to feel really good about the crapware that's on there, get a Huawei phone because there is a crazy amount of stuff
on that. You like your Mate? I
love the camera, but my God, some of the other stuff.
Those pictures that you sent back from MNWC were great.
Yeah, the camera's nice. Good. It's good. Okay,
good.
So. Tip of the week is that Microsoft has a Surface Pro 6 bundle on sale right now. The bad news is it was actually cheaper last week at the end of last week, only for a couple of days. But it is $160 off now. So for $900, you get a great configuration Surface Pro 6. Core i5, 8 gigs of RAM, 120 gigs of storage with a type cover. So the type cover is you're basically getting the type cover for free.
Nice.
Type cover is $160. The nice thing is if you go through the wizard, you can build your own bundle. You can choose which type cover you want. So that's a great price for that laptop or whatever it is. 2-in-1 tablet thing, whatever. And then a couple of mobile app picks on Android. Pocket Cast 7 is finally available. If you use Pocket Casts, you will have gotten it automatically by now, I would imagine. Major revamping of the user experience. If you're familiar with the app, the two big changes that I can see are the new Discover interface, which is how you find podcasts, and then the filter views, which lets you look at podcasts that were most recently updated, podcasts you have downloaded, and so forth. You can make your own filters as well. I actually find it a little confusing. I've been using it since the beta, which has been around for a few months, and I'm still... I listen to Pocket Casts every single day. I still go in there sometimes and have trouble understanding what is downloaded and what isn't downloaded and where things are. It doesn't do auto archiving as well as it used to do, but yeah, we're kind of stuck with it. Sorry, but it's a great app overall. And 7, we're already on 7 point whatever if you're on iOS. And then for those people who are on iOS, the Grammarly keyboard was just updated. This is a neat choice. If you use Grammarly on the PC, like as a browser extension typically, you know how valuable that is. And having that kind of grammar and spell checking available on your phone is not such a horrible idea. And so the latest version of that keyboard replacement has a bunch of stuff, but the big one is probably the dark theme, which can better map to the look and feel of the apps you're using. So good to know about, an interesting option if you're into third-party keyboards on iOS.
Nice. And I think Mary Jo Foley might have an enterprise pick of the week for us. Mary Jo?
I do. And this enterprise pick was chosen because my boss, who does a lot of earnings coverage, saw this app and he said, "Is this for real?" So what this is the Android app, the Excel app for Android from Microsoft. So if you're an Office 365 user and you have Excel on your Android phone, you can now use your camera on your phone, take a picture of table data, and it will automatically convert into a working Excel spreadsheet. Like you can edit the spreadsheet once you take the picture.
What?
I know.
I love that.
Right?
This
so that's
is really
super
cool. Yeah.
Right.
So basically, it does OCR on a picture of a spreadsheet and turns it into a spreadsheet.
Yep. And you can edit the spreadsheet. It's not just a static spreadsheet. You can actually, calculate inside the spreadsheet.
Nice.
It's now rolling out to Android, coming soon to iOS. I have not heard this feature is coming to desktop. It may just be a mobile only feature. So sorry if people are hoping insert data from picture comes to desktop, but I haven't heard that's the plan. Anyway, it's a pretty cool feature. It was announced officially at Ignite, but there were so many announcements at Ignite in September that one got kind of buried in the whole pile of them. But here it is. It's coming out now.
Good.
Yep.
Very nice. But that's not all.
That's not all. Another enterprise pick. And this is very interesting because this is something Microsoft announced in 2017. They said, we're going to be opening some data centers in Africa. And then the date when that was supposed to happen was sometime in 2018, and that came and went. But today is the day. The first 2 Microsoft data centers in Africa, one in Johannesburg, one in Cape Town, are now open and serving up Azure, fresh Azure. Before the end of this year, they say they also will be serving up Office 365 and Dynamics 365 from those data centers. So this is really good news because Microsoft has not had any data centers in Africa to this point, and they're actually ahead of Amazon, surprisingly, who has said that they will have African data centers opening in Cape Town in 2020. So yeah, here comes the cloud to Africa.
Forget about that. Here comes the beer to Windows Weekly.
Yes. Today's beer pick is from my hometown in Framingham, Massachusetts. And in fact, the beer is called Framing Hammer.
It's a good name. It's good.
I know. Framingham is a Baltic porter, which is kind of like an imperial porter / stout type beer. And if you go to Jack's Abbey, they make many kinds of this Framingham. There's graham cracker Framingham and mole Framingham. There's all kinds of crazy ones. But the one I had recently that was delicious was a bourbon barrel aged Framingham. What's good about it? It tastes like chocolate and bourbon in a beer.
Nice.
What can be bad?
What could be wrong with that?
The scary part, 10%, even though it doesn't feel like a 10% beer. So you have to be careful when you're drinking your Framingham.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. It's very, very good. And if you see any of their variants of the Framingham, they all are worth trying from Jack's Abbey.
They should make a framing ham and cheese.
They should.
Nice.
I was literally just in Framingham.
Did you go to Jack's Abbey? No, because you don't drink beer now.
No, I did. No, that's not actually why I didn't even think of it. But we were driving back on Route 9, and we stopped at an Indian restaurant in Framingham. It was great.
Okay, nice.
You know, I thought they ran all the Indians out of Massachusetts.
Right. So since that time, other Indians have showed up, but they're from a different place.
Oh. No succotash then.
No.
Good.
It's more of a buffet kind of a thing.
Good. How do you really say Framingham? You don't say. You're sounding so
Framingham.
Framingham.
That's how you say it.
Framingham.
You say Framingham or something like that?
Framingham.
No, it
Framingham.
doesn't have a weird name like Leicester or Worcester. It's
Worcester.
just
Right.
Framingham.
It's not Fram. I come from
Needham.
Fram.
Like Needham.
Needham, Dedham.
All right.
People used to always say dead ham. And like just
No.
Dedham.
Dedham.
No.
So, golly, who'd have thunk it? We have come to the end of this jam-packed edition of Windows Weekly. A lot of fun. We will be back next week. We've done all the special stuff.
Sounds like a threat.
I know. We're going to be back next week. So
Better have my money next week.
Yeah, you better.
We'll be back.
Yeah. Paul wants his money. Paulie. We're going to call him Paulie Windows Nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know
what my good fella's name.
Yeah. Paulie. Paulie wants his money. We're going to call Mary Jo Mojo.
Yeah.
Mojo, you find her at allaboutmicrosoft.com. That's the ZDNet blog. You know, you said your boss, but isn't Lindsay Turrentine now your boss?
She's the boss's boss's boss. My boss is Larry Dignan. I don't know if you know
Larry.
him.
I know Larry. Yeah, I love Larry.
He's my boss.
So Lindsay's like way high up there.
Yeah,
She's
she
like
is.
a CBS vice president now.
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow.
I know.
Good for her. She's a very nice person.
She is.
She was on Twitter a couple of weeks ago, and she said, I got a new title. I'm vice president for tech content at CBS Interactive. Wow. That's everything.
Yeah.
That's CNET.
That is.
That's ZDNet. That's
Tech Republic.
Tech Republic.
Yeah.
It's it all. It's
Yeah.
everything. You'll find Paul Thurrott at Thurrott.com. He's not the boss, but he acts like it. THURRO good.com.
I certainly don't have the biggest head at that company.
No, Mary Jo does. Do you guys still work together, right, Mary Jo? You're still doing that Petri thing, right? Yeah.
I'm doing Petri stuff with them.
Nice. Along with...
she just inserted herself into one of my work meetings like today.
Really? Oh, that's awesome.
And
Like
Paul's
this?
like, who invited you here?
insert myself on
Actually, what I wrote. Actually, I should find what I wrote. It was pretty good. I'll never find it.
It was pretty funny.
I was like, I just have one question. Who exactly invited Mary Jo into this conversation?
Paul is also a published author. Actually, they both are, but Paul somehow continues to bang his head against that rock, and he has produced, through dint of much labor, something called the Field Guide to Windows 10. It's a must-have if you have Windows 10. You can get that at leanpub.com. And there's actually some really nice posters.
It's like a salve. If you have this problem,
we got it for you.
We can, just rub this on.
Paulie Windows Nuts Amazing Miracle Elixir. I guess that's all I have to say, except that we do this show every Wednesday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. That time is changing in a weird way because this Sunday is the end of
That's right.
Standard time, we go to daylight saving time, and that means we spring forward. We set our clocks forward.
Yeah.
But
means I hope you weren't enjoying the sunsets every day because those are going to go away again. Sunrises. Sorry.
Sunrises. We're still 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. But now, because of that, next week, in the rest of the world, there might be a kind of a weird change for you. It will be 1800 UTC instead of 1900 UTC. I think that's correct. I go through this twice a year, and it drives me nuts. You know, the EU is about to vote to end daylight saving time.
Yeah,
EU-wide.
Because I want to see the sunrise, and I'm getting tired of this.
I'm tired of it. So if you can't figure out what that all means, we have on-demand versions for you at twit.tv/www. 2 W's. One's for Windows, one's for Weekly, or on YouTube, or you could really the best thing to do is get that Pocket Cast Paul was talking about, or Overcast, or Stitcher, or Slacker, or Spotify. Pandora, we're now on Pandora as well. Anywhere you can get podcasts. Subscribe to Windows Weekly. You won't want to miss an episode. You'll get it the fastest that way, automatically. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time on Windows Weekly.